Now you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown on this sunny Tuesday evening. If you hear birds chirping and children playing in the background, it's because I'm letting some of the fresh air come in and hit me and maybe take me down from the anger of just being inside recording this podcast while there's actual sunshine in Ireland. We don't get it too often. So, yes, I am bitter that we're going to be recording this podcast at 5:30, but we have to do it because Celtic are victorious once again, 4-1 against Kilmarnock at the weekend. Welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. I'm Enda Call and I'm joined by Alan Morrison and Juco James as always. Lads, is it nice and sunny where you guys are?
Well, it rained. We're in a sandwich here. We don't get spring that much anymore. I'm in Pennsylvania. And so it was about, I don't know, 28, 29 degrees, a couple of, I'm fluent in Celsius in case you didn't know that. And then today it's, a lot cooler. And then tomorrow we go back to like 30. It's crazy in this time of year. Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. So.
Well, it's about 14 degrees here. So I would say it's tops off weather almost at this point in time.
Show off the man boobs weather for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sunny here. It's very windy actually. You don't get perfection in Sheffield.
No, we don't get it too often here in Ireland, so I'm pretty happy that it's here. So look, these are the difficult games I find to analyze because it was so conclusive, 4-1 to Celtic in the end. So we're going to try to pick through it as best we can. There were a good few talking points actually from this game that we can dig our teeth into. I guess the first one is the starting lineup in this game that was changed from the weekend. And it was some interesting changes, some changes we were probably waiting to see some players get minutes in certain games. Carl Starfelt was moved to right centre back. We're going to talk about that. Kobayashi came in at left centre back. We'll talk about his performance. Tomoki Iwata moved into the midfield, and then Haksabanovic also came in for a rare start in the team. So if you're joining us on YouTube, do leave your comments. How did you find the game? What do you think of the game? And make sure you like the video as well. Alan, I guess we'll start with your general thoughts in the game. I watched this game on my phone in Copenhagen while I was waiting to go out for my dinner because I was on my holidays, and it was just your bog standard game away from home where Celtic scored early and continued to score, and the game was over within 35 minutes essentially.
Yeah, it's a pretty sort of bleak minimalist view of the field, I think, and reflects your current depression due to lack of vitamin D, I think, and get out there and get some sun.
I think it's also left over from paying 15 euros a pint in Copenhagen, probably.
15 euros being kind. 15 euros being kind. I paid 25 euro for 2 coffees and 2 croissants.
I now know why you're grumpy. That stings. It was a lot cheaper in Budapest, I have to say. But listen, no, I thought it was actually a very interesting match in many ways. The first 27 minutes, to be precise, were possibly the best we've seen Celtic play on an artificial pitch in terms of the pace that they moved the ball, the fluency of movement, of passing, all helped, of course, by Kilmarnock playing this kind of 4-4-2, which on the face of it, you think, okay, well, you can be very compact with a 4-4-2. We've talked about Celtic playing 4-4-2 without the ball in sort of defensive mode in European games, for example. But this wasn't that. This was a pretty stretched 4-4-2 with lots of space and the wide players never tucking in and the two in the middle getting completely overrun. And Matt O'Reilly just had the time of his life in the first 27 minutes. He was basically allowed to wander wherever he wanted and had the freedom of the central areas to cause absolute merry hell. So it was interesting from that respect, and interesting that, having made changes, Celtic, to be so fluent off the bat and to get the game done in those first 27 minutes was pretty impressive. Thereafter, I think it was kind of job done, and the second half was. I'm going to mention David Dickinson, the referee, because I think he actually ruined the game for both teams. He just blew up for virtually every contact in the second half and just killed it. Kilmarnock obviously did better. They had to. They went back to a more sort of 4-5-1, and they sat deep and they just tried to not concede any more goals. And then they got a bit of joy with a few free kicks and corners and so forth until Celtic picked it up again in the last 10 minutes when they got tired again. So, yeah, listen, lots of interesting details within that to pick up on, but that was my sort of general summary of the game.
What about you, James? Are you similar enough to Alan here?
Yeah, I think that I'll characterize the first half as Derek McInnes not getting the St. Mirren memo that everyone else had since September. And
he's not on the WhatsApp, is he?
Yeah, he's out of that group. So yeah, the second half they were a little more, and I think it was just so they understandably didn't want to get further humiliated, because if they had kept up with that, I mean, it could have been any number. High single digits or even worse. So yeah, and again, Twitter is always such a hellscape, but seeing people get upset when we're up 4-1 and mailing it in that kind of game, I mean, the second half was largely an eyesore, but again, this time of season, these guys have played a lot of games. It's on that kind of pitch against what's effectively a rugby team. And with the ref blowing anyone that fouls if you breathed on somebody. I mean, it was a pretty rough second half watch. But yeah, I agree with Alan. The first half actually had some interesting aspects to it, and it again opens up this idea that this legacy mentality. This is my point of view that I've declared multiple times, is that this legacy mentality that when Celtic come in, you should have a go. When you're at home and you're one of these teams that just do not have the quality to do that, this is the kind of thing that's going to happen against this version of Celtic under Ange. And, again, with those kind of spaces stretched out between the lines, I mean, it was just shredding them. So that was fun to watch. And then, the second half, not so much.
It's not the first time this season that Derek McInnes has just open the doors for Celtic to run through them. It really shows probably a lack of awareness within the structure that he's trying to play. That, I mean, fair play to them. They wanted to play that way and they got punished within the first half. But yeah, Jesus, it was a bloodbath from about the 5th minute onwards from Celtic. You mentioned the word legacy there. Before we move on to the game specific, I want to talk about Kyogo for 1 second, because he scored the first goal in this game. That's 23 goals this season now in the SPFL, 29 goals altogether this season in all competitions. Now, he's well off the actual record of single season goals of Jimmy McGrory, but I don't think anybody will get to that at this point in time. I can't find the correct number for Henrik Larsson's best season for Celtic in a single season, but this guy is doing some. Yeah, I think it was in the 50s.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's 50 or 52. I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, he's clearly not going to get anywhere near that, and he's clearly not anywhere near the level that Henrik Larsson was at his peak. But 29 goals at this stage of the season, with a large amount of the games still to play in 2 competitions, there's a strong possibility that he could potentially reach the 35-40 goal mark, which is just exceptional, really. Like, there's not too much you can say about him other than he's evolved his game from the first season that he came, probably out of necessity. In the first season, he was required to do a lot more, whereas this year he's just a killer in the box and has managed to stay fit, which is probably the most important aspect of him scoring so many goals this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably got 6, hopefully 8 games left. So, you probably shouldn't expect more than maybe a goal a game or just under. You wouldn't have thought. So, yeah, he might get into the sort of hopefully gets over 30 at least, sort of thing. Difficult to compare because, like, for example, even Larsson rarely was substituted that much. So he would generally be playing 90 minutes in most games. You didn't have the number of substitutes in those days, even in the early 2000s. So what you have to remember with Kyogo, as I said before, in terms of putting his achievements into context, is that he's rarely playing anything like 90 minutes. And he's virtually always playing against the best of the opposition, i.e., from the start, when they're fresh, when they're fit, when they're fully motivated, not demotivated, not being run ragged, not tired, etc. So he has to unlock the best of the opposition. There's no sort of cheap late goals when you're already 3 or 4-0 up, sort of thing. So I think that's important context for him. So I think in terms of looking at Gary Hooper had a couple of good seasons, etc. I would look at goals per 90 minutes completed really as the sort of comparator. And I think Kyogo, I haven't checked, but he might be around about 0.85, which I suspect is as good as equal with probably the best that Larsson managed actually in a season. Listen, different times, different competition, different opponents, different style of football in many respects, but just on a raw numbers basis, I suspect his season is up there on a by minute basis with any of the sort of strikers that we've seen in recent sort of this century, let's say.
I mean, the comparison to Larsson is always one that comes up because that's the last really, truly great striker that Celtic have had. They've had very good players as strikers in recent memory, but Henrik Larsson's the last great one that Celtic could have played at any team in any league in any world and would have been up there with the best players amongst them. But James, with Kyogo, it's sort of that modern side of Celtic where we might have this guy for 3 seasons, argument's sake, we have him for 4 or 5 and he probably ends up playing for Celtic for the rest of his career. I think that's unlikely, but if he stayed, we're probably looking at a consistency that he's easily a 25-goal striker for Celtic every single season. And that's something that we haven't really seen recently.
Yeah, it's, the other 2 that would be in consideration, in kind of the last, let's say since 15, 16, since Rodgers' arrival, obviously Dembele and Edouard, and those were really young guys who, had, let's call it complex experiences at the club, and particularly in their final seasons for both of them. And they, being that young, it's just different. When you get a guy who's Kyogo's age, who's coming in more mature, maturity typically comes with more professionalism, more consistency. You even saw that with Larsson. I'm not saying professionalism, but when he first arrived, he wasn't what he turned into. He kind of grew into that after a couple of seasons, and particularly coming back from the broken leg. So, I just, he's such a joy to watch. And the other aspect of this is that he's playing in a system in a league that's just getting absolutely obliterated. So, Alan and I think we're on the same page at pretty comfortably expecting over 100 goals this season. We've already hit it. People were talking about, can we get up, approach some of the other high marks in recent years. I think that the Lisbon season's probably a little too far, but it's, so you have to account for that too. I mean, that he's scoring within the context of, I think Celtic's top goals when Larsson may have been 97 for the team. I don't know. I'm going off memory. I have a spreadsheet for that, but that might be off, but that's what if I remember right for maybe the 02-03 season. But it's I think he's definitely the most productive we've had since Larsson. Better, best, those are all kind of difficult things to talk about. And he has such a specific role that he's playing that we've discussed repeatedly about this kind of low volume of touches. And to your point, and he's just an assassin in the box. I mean, it's and people even talked about questioning his finishing at one point last season. It's just, that's been Looneyville talk. He's been very consistent overall. And like I said, I just really enjoy watching him.
Alan, I think you've pulled up a few numbers here, have you?
Yeah, so when you asked that question, I knew I had some spreadsheet somewhere that would have a little bit of help on this. So sorry, I've just been digging about as James has been speaking. So a couple of things on Larsson. Like I said, I mean, he made 315 appearances for Celtic, and he played the 90-minute equivalent of 301, which basically tells you he nearly always played 90 minutes, right? So you got to take that into account. There's no, with Kyogo, you're not seeing any sort of, as I say, late, let's call it late cheap goals and in big wins, that kind of thing. But in terms of, Larsson, like you say, he started relatively slowly. Like he said, he scored 19 goals in his first season in nearly 50 games, but then he hit his stride, and and even then, even though he got that horrendous injury, he came back and then had his best season where he scored 53. Now in that season, he was scoring 1.07 goals per 90 minutes, which was easily his best. His next best after that was the 2002-2003 season, where he scored 44, and he was at 0.9 goals per 90 minutes. Kyogo's at 0.95. So he's actually better than Larsson's second best season, not quite as good as Larsson's best season, but certainly, he's up there, sort of second, if you like, to Larsson's best season in terms of goals per 90 minutes. And I think that, I know we talk about the relative strengths of the league and that you can debate that, but I say, given the context that he's always performing virtually for 60, 65 minutes against the best of teams, I think that's a pretty admirable strike rate, and compares very well with, as I say, with Pete Larsson, really, in that regard.
Well, I think the disparity
just on goals, obviously, just on goals.
I think there's a large disparity on penalty goals there too, as well. I mean, at Kyogo's, Larsson scored a ton of penalties. Well, right, but so he did score some of them.
Yeah, you hit more, you miss more. That's the Messi conundrum.
That's right.
Why does Messi miss so many penalties? Well, he takes every single one of them, so he's bound to miss a couple of them here and there. Yeah,
and you don't get. I mean, you got to factor in Larsson 128 assists as well. So I'm not comparing.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Footballers, we're comparing the scoring rate, right? The scoring rate is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Before people in the comments come at us, no, we are not saying Kyogo is better than Henrik Larsson. No, we're not. But I will address one comment, and that is John Duncan, who is saying that Kyogo doesn't even enter the top 5 strikers for Celtic. Lee Griffiths was better for Celtic than Kyogo. I cannot disagree more. That's all I'll say to that. Cannot disagree more. Let's get into this game then, because there are a couple of things to touch on in this game, and one of them is a centre back. And there is a comment in that sort of goes to this, and it's Kookaburra says the Starfelt looks so much more comfortable playing on his natural right side, and the same can be said with Kobayashi on the left. Throwing a curveball in here, could this be the future of Celtic centre backs if they sell Cameron Carter-Vickers, which they potentially could?
I mean, I think, and we've discussed this in the past, all of the issues that Starfelt has are compounded by him playing on the left. And he's effectively being asked in that role to play to an extent, the ball playing center back role. I mean, he's the one that carries the ball more. He's the one that, because we're so still tilted left-sided, not as much as we had been in the past, but we still tilt to the left. And so if you just look at his volume of actions and what he's asked to do, it's a bigger role, and it doesn't really suit him that well. At least I think I'll speak for Alan there. We collectively agree on that. So with him having that right-sided role, it's simplified. He's not being asked to do as many things. And yeah, I think he probably I still think there are issues there that make him less than ideal, but if I was going to play him somewhere, it would be in that position, in that role. And I think he would be materially better in that role than what he's been in the one that he's played.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird thing when you see someone switch to a different side and how much of an impact that can make. I think you sort of see that with Man United now. Harry Maguire has come in at the right centre back, whereas predominantly he's played on the left. And what Erik ten Hag said about that, and it makes total sense. And I would imagine it's very similar to Starfelt and his conversation now playing as a right centre back, is the passing angles change completely for him now as somebody who's carrying the ball out, because he's right-footed. He's naturally right-footed. He sees more coming in onto his natural right foot. And it's one of those fancy words, Alan, passing angles, that is a modern term in football, but in real life term, it just means that the game opens up in front of you much better, and you're much more comfortable in the angle that you're going to be passing the ball. It's very simple stuff, but can make a big impact.
I think I like James's phrase about, simplifying the game for him, and that's really what it boils down to for me. Because you've got two very contrasting centre backs for Celtic. You've got Cameron Carter-Vickers, who's got this amazing gift to be able to simplify the game in front of him. He doesn't overcomplicate in his decision making. He's very sure about his positioning. He's very decisive in his actions, and he rarely makes a bad decision. He doesn't overcommit. He doesn't lay himself open to risk by trying to do something that doesn't look to be, as a low probability event, like trying to win a header that's just not possible, or trying to get his foot in when he just, the player's shielding it well. Whereas Starfelt's almost the opposite. He tries to do things. He tries to be very front foot, very aggressive, but by doing so, he takes risks in his defending. Now, by being at least on the right side, you kind of reduce some of that, certainly on the ball activity. You probably don't change the nature of his defending, but you make the game simpler for him from a passing perspective. And let's face it, a Celtic centre-back might have maybe 10 duels in a game, but they'll probably be attempting nearly 100 passes. So actually, you're simplifying an enormous part of the game for Starfelt by simply having him on that side. And, it's just the simple fact of when he is on the ball and there's not a pass on, and we watch him, this horrendously complicated, cumbersome movement that he makes to turn to get the ball onto his right side, and then almost falls over as he squares it across the box. And it's, you put him under pressure, and that all becomes quite stressful. So if you remove that, and he can play comfortably off his right foot on the right side, I just think it just reduces an awful lot of risk from the game. I've tried to find out, sort of nudge and prompt as best I can with the limited sort of context I've got as to why is it that he's on the left and why is Cameron Carter-Vickers on the right. I mean, I don't honestly know. I don't believe there's and someone can welcome to come on and correct me, but I don't believe there's a tactical reason for it. It might even be as simple as Cameron Carter-Vickers was there first and he started on the right, and I was like, well, we'll not move him because he's doing well. Now, I do think if that is the case, there is a strong case to say, look, Cameron Carter-Vickers, I would imagine if you played him right or left, you're going to get a pretty consistent level of performance from him because he just seems to be that kind of player. Therefore, why not put him on the left and just make the game simpler for Starfelt, because he's clearly the one that other teams target. He clearly, we get more errors out of him. It's more danger comes down his side. So the more we can make that simpler, I think the more we de-risk for the whole team. But it's one I don't understand. I'll be honest with you. It's one thing I don't know why they align that way. But we saw the other, he was up against two big strikers. It can often cause him problems. He was fine. He was really good.
Is Starfelt better taking the ball out than Cameron Carter-Vickers, or is that just something that is done because it's coming from the left-hand side?
I would measure that by sort of looking at kind of passing, because that's basically, reasonably aggressive front foot passing. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at a very complicated spreadsheet at the moment. If you look at this kind of season, then what you're looking at for Starfelt, sort of packing score 52 per game, Carter-Vickers 48. So you could argue there's not a lot in it. And actually, you could argue, Starfelt off his wrong side might even be a better ball progressor, and he might even get better numbers if you put him on his right side.
Yeah, to Starfelt's credit, I think he's made material improvements in that regard. He, as I used to joke, he'd go on walkabout quite a bit, where he'd carry the ball a long distance into the attacking half or even the attacking third, and then do the curly where he'd go whoop, 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 and spin around, not really know what to do with it. And I think he's gotten better at not putting himself in those. And in fairness, Christopher Ayer used to do that too, by the way, a lot more than people think or remember, I think. So, he takes himself into a position now where I think he's made a lot of progress in ball progression, but then he smartly gets rid of it and gives it to somebody who's going to do a better job of, taking that next step. And I think he has shown the ability to accelerate with more. And this is my eye test. I think he's faster on the ball than Carter Vickers in the carry, progressing that ball. I mean, he's a fast guy, so I think he's got better pace. And that's where I do think he has improved in the ability to carry at pace and do it under control. It's that end. What do you do with it once you get there? Where I think he's also improved and kept that simple and not tried to do too much. So yeah, I think, we get back to Starfelt is more so the other elements that I think are, just probably never going to get much better. I shouldn't say never, but I'm skeptical that they'll get that much better, is that I don't think he offers that much in attacking set pieces. That continues to be fairly woeful, which again, also is kind of like Iyer, who never really improved in that regard either. And, until proven otherwise, some of these mental lapses, maybe that gets reduced because of being more natural and comfortable playing on the right. Theoretically, I could see that potentially, but yeah. So I think he's got the vast majority of what Carter Vickers would bring on the right, but I also agree with Alan that Carter Vickers probably has an easier time transitioning over to the left side. So I agree that it's been kind of a quixotic fit.
Yeah. Jumping on your natural side is easier than jumping on your non-natural side, your weaker side. So you theoretically think that under the high ball on the right-hand side, Starfelt would be stronger, but this is all hypotheticals, which is, it's hard to deal in hypotheticals without seeing too much of him. Like Starfelt was strong at the weekend, could be terrible next week if he plays right center back. It's very hard to know, but it seems like he would be naturally stronger on the right hand side. And with a natural left center back, which Celtic have been lacking for, let's say, 15 years at least.
Since Chuckles, right?
Yeah. Christopher Iyer wasn't a natural left center back for sure. But I mean, we now have one in Kobayashi who looks really comfortable there. Theoretically, if Celtic were to lose Cameron Carter-Vickers, it wouldn't be ideal, but Starfelt seems to look like a player who would be comfortable enough filling in as the right centre back. Is that where we're coming out of this discussion? It's not what you would want, but you would deal with it.
I think he'd make a great backup to Awada as the starting right centre back, but that's okay.
Okay. And what about Kobayashi then? I seen somebody make the comparison to him and an NFL quarterback. So James, you're the resident Yank here. Explain what people are talking about here.
Yeah. So I think my guess would be is being able to have your head up and read, up the pitch for guys who are moving into space. And then effectively not only identifying, but then accurately delivering the pass. And to do it in a way where they have, decent body shape and aren't going to get attacked immediately from defenders and lose possession. So I suspect that's probably what the analogy is. And I generally agree. I mean, even at looking at him coming in from Japan, that seemed to be, his relative strength. And that very different situation. But if you're going to tilt things on question marks, it would be more on the defending side. And consistency there, and whether he's going to be able to compete at that higher level in that regards. But yeah, his skill set on the ball, I think he's definitely beginning to show that quality that again looked like he had coming out of Japan.
He carries himself in a similar vein to Christopher Iyer, like in the sense of he's tall, natural, looks comfortable on the ball, looks like a guy who's confident in possession, which, a couple of players that we've had, Starfelt on the left-hand side, does not look the same as Kobayashi does. And that can lead to like perceptions in favor of Kobayashi and perceptions against Starfelt. So I am aware of that just because somebody looks uncomfortable in the ball doesn't mean that they are uncomfortable in the ball. But Kobayashi looks like someone who's going to be very comfortable even under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, the data around turnovers Starfelt in the defensive third kind of prove that point. But listen, Kobayashi then. So I agree. I agree with what you're saying in terms of the things I look at. I look at natural, because the thing I love in a football player is balance. So in terms of he's upright, he looks balanced in that his movements are quick on either side. He maintains his balance at pace. He seems to be able to to play off both sides reasonably comfortable. I like the fact that on Sunday there were two or three occasions when it looked like Kilmarnock had pressed quite well. They'd pinned Celtic's defence in, and Kobayashi played quite simple but quick passes out and basically broke through the press very easily. I really like that a lot, and because that's obviously that's the kind of thing you want to see in Europe, for example, where you will get pressed well, and you will have to react quickly to kind of break that press. And in terms of his distribution, I mean, he completed 122 passes, which was 23 more than the next player. He had 26 pack passes, which is 13 more, so double the next highest, which was Taylor. And now these weren't, to sort of labour the quarterback analogy, these weren't sort of looking to get into the end zone type passes. These were more 5-yard first down passes. They were relatively safe, but they progressed the ball, and that's fine. I don't expect the centre backs to be doing that. You don't expect sort of Glenn Hoddle kind of passes every 2 minutes sort of thing. You want the ball progressed. You want it to progress quickly and safely, and he absolutely did that. He did that really, really well. Didn't see much of him in an attacking sense, even in the box, because he is, to your point, he is taller for sure than Starfelt and Carter Vickers. They're both, and Welsh really, they're both kind of barely 6 foot, and they're all sort of barely 6 foot. Let's get that debate started again. Whereas Kobayashi looks at an inch or two kind of taller than those players. Having said that, he did get beat on a few aerial balls by Vassell. So but actually he won a few. He won a few ground duels as well, so he was quite sort of quick and decisive in the tackle. So I like the look of him. He looks somebody who's technically very good. He's strong enough. He's probably going to lose a few aerial balls, but then we know that every team in Scotland has a big lad up front or two, and we'll prey on that. It's not the end of the world as long as you're organised around second balls, or sometimes Starfelt, as I say, creates problems because he attacks things he's never going to win. I think Kobayashi, went for high balls that he had a right to go for. He just sometimes was beaten by the bigger, stronger player. So yeah, I think the ball progression is absolutely spot on. But the bit I liked most of all was just those little moments where he got himself out of trouble just because technically he's good, his control was good, his balance was good, his strength was good, and he just had that little bit of quality to get out of sticky situations. As I say, because those are the things you need your defenders to do in tight spots in Europe.
For those of you who already have a vein bursting on the side of your head at the Kyogo Larsson comparison, I'm going to say that a better comparison to Kobayashi than Ajer is probably Virgil van Dijk, so beware that vein might be about to burst. But just not in the sense of defending, we have not seen nearly enough of him to make that comparison and how good he's going to be. But in terms of he oozes confidence. It's almost an arrogance that he uses in many ways, which I love to see from a modern centre back. And if he's able to develop his longer passing, that's what Virgil van Dijk is, thrives on doing, is that long diagonal ball, which could bring some extra dynamism to Celtic's attack, which would be nice if we didn't have to always rely on going through the centre of the midfield, which would be nice against teams who play a deeper line against us. So we shall wait and see how he's going to be used. Tomoki Iwata also came into this game as a starter, and I know we've spoken about him a couple of times in the last couple of pods, but this was a game where we got to see more of him, James, and what we saw of him was very, very positive, and pretty much all of what we've seen of him so far, bar the lack of creativity potentially, has been positive.
Yeah, he's living up to the billing. I mean, that one kind of profiled what he played like and looked like in Japan. He's showing all of those qualities. I characterized him as preternaturally safe in his passing. That was in his data from Japan, and I think so far he's basically displayed that, gives the ball away very infrequently, but relatively safe. He's functional in his passing. He's not, stunted, meaning that he's not a simpleton in his passing, but he's generally safe. He's not going to be doing a lot of line splitting, creative passing from deep, which is, again, kind of why I like him, the idea of him at center back. But he's got that athleticism. He's got that size. He's very aggressive in the tackle, strong. And he seems to be kind of a smart, tough type of character. And that's, that when you put all that together, that's a pretty compelling defensive midfielder, and with some pace, which is nice too when he's got that size. So, to me, it hasn't been about questioning his quality. It's more of an issue of how does he fit within the other, puzzle pieces and where he might be best utilized. I think that's, to me, the more interesting question, because he does appear to be a very, very, consistently quality player and reliable in what he looks like he's good at doing. And those things tend to be, the consistent aspects. I mean, that creativity can kind of come and go a little bit. That's the more volatile aspect of the game. Whereas the kind of stuff that he does really well are the kind of things that he can deliver pretty much every game. And that has a lot of value when you can do it at such a high level.
Well, Alan, we spoke about this midfield three of Iwata, McGregor, and O'Reilly because it was the Ross County game that all three of them started together. Now, it started with a different pairing that, Haksabanovic wasn't as a winger and Maeda, and then Kyogo up front. So, I mean, that does impact the midfield and what they're able to do, but we didn't see much from a creative standpoint from that trio against Ross County. But in this game, it definitely seemed to click very, very nicely. And they were certainly not lacking in creativity with having Iwata and McGregor in the same team at the same time.
No, it was interesting. It was kind of fluid. I mean, I don't think at any point, I mean, one of them would obviously always be that anchor, but it varied as to who that was. It was quite interesting in that respect that, there was that flexibility in terms of who was the deeper. In fact, it's quite interesting if you look at I've got the StatsBomb passing network map, which kind of also, it's a very simplistic view, but it kind of gives you an average position for the players. And actually, McGregor and Iwata occupy exactly the same position in central midfield, meaning that they kind of alternated really between who was going to be the anchor and who kind of maybe broke forward. And so I like that. I was like letting intelligent players, make decisions. In the second half, McGregor probably dropped a little bit deeper. Iwata probably pushed on a little bit deeper, but you couldn't say that either was really playing as a kind of eight. In fact, it really was more of a 4-2-3-1 in all honesty. Without, when we had the ball, it was more that shape. So we didn't really overcommit. Again, too many players forward. I mean, Johnson and Taylor got forward a lot more than they had done in the Derby game. And obviously O'Reilly, as we said, was basically free to be another striker. He was given so much freedom. So Iwata allowed that to happen by being disciplined, being well organised, and communication well with McGregor in terms of who was going to sit and who was going to go. That was obviously had to have been going on for Celtic to maintain the shape and without overcommitting, which I didn't get a sense happened. And we certainly didn't get caught out on transition, as far as I can remember. So in terms of his numbers, nothing spectacular, I would say. As you say, his passing's kind of safe. It's not too expansive. He doesn't really get involved. In fact, when he did get the ball a couple of times on the edge of the opposition box, he was kind of circumspect. He didn't, apart from one really nice shot which he hit well. He was really looking to bring others into the game. But I think also, again, context, right? We have to be, patient with him. He's a bit like, Maeda, Ediguchi, and Hatate. Last season, they came in during the January window, and if you remember, they'd come off a full Japanese season, and then they'd had a bit of a break, and then they almost they had a short pre-season essentially, which was Celtic's winter break, and it's been much the same for Maeda and Kobayashi this time around, where they've kind of come off a full season. They've had a bit of a break, then they've had a bit of a short pre-season, and now they're kind of starting to ramp up on the minutes. So I would suggest we're not seeing the best of him possibly yet, and that's okay. I think a full structured pre-season where he's at the same level as all the other players, I think we'll start to see him. But I'm like James, I'm super excited about it because he's the sort of player we don't really have. I don't mind the fact he's not overly creative because I think we've got enough risk takers on the pitch at any one time. So you need a couple of players that are just going to be steady, and he seems to be good at that. And he does give that bit of pace and physicality around the place as well. So I don't think we're seeing anything amazing, but I think we're seeing a really solid, intelligent footballer, and that's good enough for me at this stage.
Yeah, and it certainly helps when Matt O'Reilly is playing well to add that creativity to the midfield, because I guess that was probably the missing link in the Ross County game, is that was a period where Matt O'Reilly was not playing well, and he definitely seems to be playing with more confidence now in the last number of games. Got the assist against Rangers, and now got a goal in this game as well, and he just seems to be playing a little bit more free, and maybe that comes from, who knows where it comes from at this point. It's like,
I think he was, the shape of the team kind of, with Iwata and injuries and so forth, kind of forced into him to be a more natural 10. And maybe that, he'll never, I don't suspect he'll get as much space and time on the ball in central areas close to goal as he got against Kilmarnock. But if you do that anywhere up to 30 yards out, if you give him time to bring the ball down, take a yard forward and get his head up, you see what a beautiful striker of the ball he is. I mean, both the goals he scored were wonderful finishes, but my God, he had time to take the ball down, progress a yard, and still nobody was on him. And he was inside the center of the box. It was incredible.
Big fan of that. Big fan of that. So there's a question in on Twitter from JD, which sort of rounds up this conversation around the game, and that is, would love to hear James and Alan's thoughts on the statistics on Haksabanovic in comparison to our other wingers. JD says that he's not convinced with him so far. So, I mean, we spoke about Haksabanovic off the bench and the impact that he can make against a tired team. What did we think of him as a starter in this game?
I think he continues to, as I've been using recently the analogy of a baseball analogy of a quad A player, meaning that he's against lower quality opposition, he can absolutely fillet them because he's such a skilled player on the ball. But you even see against, teams like Kilmarnock, any opposition that's relatively athletic, he has difficulty because of his relative lack of speed and kind of beating guys, so he's crafty, he's good in space. He can even beat guys one-on-one in a dribble because he's very skillful on the ball. But I that just continues to be so this is not the kind of game where he's going to have a problem. In my mind, it's more so against teams that have more speed and can present him some of those challenges. But yeah, I mean, he's just a really talented guy. I mean, on the ball, his ability to manipulate the ball, pass the ball, strike the ball. I mean, he's just very high quality in that. And if you see, his stats back that up, meaning that his stats display that of a high IQ player, right? So for me, it's his judgment, his decision making, all that stuff seems to be pretty good, and his production is good. It's just my concern continues to be how that scales against higher quality. And again, it's just the way Kilmarnock played, and the level that they're at is not the case study to test that thesis.
A question from Stephen Donahue here, Alan. Could he be our number 10 then? So Celtic don't really play with a traditional number 10, but as a form of sort of changing the shape in game for different situations. I think we've seen him as a 10 before for Celtic a couple of times, and it does work. It definitely does work when he drifts into the central areas.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before, and certainly that's my considered view really is that he would be better as a sort of forward attacking number 10 rather than out wide, simply because of the pace and athleticism deficit that he has. And I think we saw against Kilmarnock. So in terms of the three players that were brought in, let's be honest, he probably was the one that did the least to make a compelling case for starting the next game. He's almost the opposite of Starfelt. So what do I mean by that? Starfelt, I think, is a really, really good defender in the box. He's very rarely in the wrong position in the box. He's very good at getting to crosses. He's very good at clearing. He's very good at getting his body in the right position, and so forth. I worry about when he's outside the box. Haksabanovic, I think, is one of these players who you need to get him as close to goal as you can. Okay, the further away from goal he is, the less effective he is, because he doesn't have the physicality or the pace to be a difference maker from distance. He's not going to, beat a man and then release somebody. He's got the passing ability, but even against Kilmarnock, you saw that he was just being even when he cut in, he was just being crowded out off the ball too easily and knocked off it. I mean, nobody in that game lost the ball, as in they were just simply tackled off of it more than he did. 11 times he was challenged off the ball, which is 4 more than Maeda. Whereas if you get him closer to goal and you're just needing to drop a shoulder and get half a yard to, because he's very, very creative, then I think that's really where you'll see the best of him. But unless we're going with Iwata and McGregor, we just not going. We just don't play that out and out number 10. That's the problem. And then if you played him instead of O'Reilly, for example, then you're losing an awful lot of ability to turn the ball and to press effectively from the front, which is O'Reilly gives you that. It gives you excellent front pressing and ball winning capabilities from the front, which I don't think is really part of Haksabanović's game. So I think you can play him wide when you bring him on late in a game against tiring teams, and he's can be on the front foot and he can get the ball in high positions. But starting him as a wide player, where he's going to have to sort of get the defense moving backwards and pushing them back, I just don't see that being a strong point for him, unfortunately. So it's a bit of a conundrum, really. I mean, it's early days again. He's played the equivalent of sort of 12 and a half games. It's enough to form as I say, an opinion, which is what I'm trying to do. But, it's still relatively early. But I do worry that he'll end up not really finding a permanent role in this team because of the strengths and weaknesses that we've talked about there. That would be my concern.
Mm-hmm. And just to finish off this conversation, there's links with Ajax for Liel Abada in the last couple of days. He could be out the door in the summer. We've spoken about it before. We've gone into depth at it. But the question comes in from somebody who I can't find the comment anymore, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is Rukavata the obvious replacement? Is he showing enough? I know he's had 15 minutes total or so for Celtic so far, but is it too early to get excited about him coming in at this age? I mean, I think personally that a player of his age being trusted by Ange to play within the structure that he wants to play has to have something about him. And I'm going to go out and say that he's going to be playing in the starting team next season.
Yeah, I mean, so yesterday was his birthday. So Rocco just
turned 18, yeah.
Just turned 18. So happy birthday, Rocco. But yeah, that would be, I mean, this is, I've talked about a lot. 18, 19 is, if we're going to be developing the echelon of talent that we aspirationally should be, he should be getting meaningful minutes next season. Material, not like, come on late in the game because we're just trying to get him, a feel of the game. So I have no clue. I mean, just haven't seen him enough. There's no idea, but ideally that would be the case. But again, this is the time of the year when you start to see teams that even maybe don't have that level of player, those players start to get those kind of minutes, right? These games, we're up 4-0 against it, or 4-1 against a team that's, basically completely overwhelmed. It's late in the season. We're getting there, comfortably well ahead in the league. This is when you start getting the younger players throughout the years. That's when they start to get some minutes. So yeah, it would be great. I have no clue if he does, but you know, we've talked about it. I mean, Abada, as quixotic as he is, his deliverables when he's played and the production has been at a level that's not going to be easy to replace. So I think assuming that a guy like Vada could do that, I think would be, you know, a pretty tough ask. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I hope it does. That would be great if we internally produce that kind of talent. But I think it's going to be a challenge.
Depending on what happens with Mikey Johnson next season,
buddy.
I think that Rocco Vada will be he'll be in the UEFA squad because he'll count as a homegrown player. So I think if you're in their UEFA squad, then you should be pushing for minutes. And you see the talent that comes out of Celtic. Celtic have not been producing top level talent really in the last decade, at least. You need to start seeing homegrown talent coming through the academy, whether we're dipping into the Japanese market or Korean markets every year. You need to see players coming from Scotland as well. And so it's promising to see.
Right. So that's the question, right? Because that's the inherent challenge that Celtic have because of some of the, specific rules around being in Scotland and not really having a good pathway for these young players. I don't think they've been terribly sophisticated in how they've placed players for loan spells either in the past. I don't think there's been a lot of thought, why Adam Montgomery's been at St. Johnston, right? I mean, how is that a development benefit for him relative to playing at Celtic if he has a future, right? So, here's a guy, Vada, who's just turned 18, who's been playing in a B team in, what effectively is a really, really, really lower league. Hasn't even been out on loan yet, playing at so is he going to make that kind of jump? This is not guys playing for Salzburg's B team at Liefering in the second tier of Austrian football, right? This is a guy playing against basically part-timers in what is it, the fifth tier of, or the fifth tier of Scottish football. So that's a big ask, like to go from that all the way up to competing for first team minutes as a starter at Celtic. That's
hard to do.
That's tough. Yeah, I mean, even Abada was playing senior football in Israel and doing it at least at a pretty good level at the same age. That's not what Vada's doing. So again, I think it would be it's a big ask to expect him to make that kind of jump. It's a big ask to ask anybody. I mean, and again, that's the problem with Celtic. I think that's partly why we've had such a, flood of the top talent leaving, is because they don't have that development pathway. So
is he capable of doing it because he's going to be playing for the Republic of Ireland? I'm going to say yes. So with Mikey Johnson coming back, Celtic will have 2 Republic of Ireland internationals starting at right and left wing. So that's my prediction for next year. Liam Skills to come back off loan as well, plays left center back instead of Kobayashi. Then we've got the Holy Trinity,
Seems like a Neil Lennon team.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. I would not put it past him. Look, I think that's where we'll park today's show, unless there's anything else that you just want to pick up on.
Yeah, the only other thing and this is just a teaser heading in the next season, is one of the things that I'm most interested in is, going into season 3, how much more tactical flexibility Ange starts to build in, meaning that he's going to, at that point, have fully revamped the squad, a lot of transfer windows. So, for example, when Alan's describing these players, and I'm thinking about who we have, right away, it's like, well, we have the personnel for 3-4-2-1, right? Still playing the way that Ange wants to play, but if you want to have two number 10s in Matt O'Reilly and Haksabanovic behind a striker, you have Awada and McGregor as the 2 sitting midfielders. We've talked about how Alistair Johnson, profiles as a right center back in a back 3. You know what I mean? So we start to see how some of these players could fit in roles that are still, matching how Ange wants to play, but just a little bit more optimization, let's say, as far as tactical setup relative to personnel. So that's because that is a system he's played in the past. So again, this is not coming out of nowhere. Like Ange just played 3-4-2-1. He's played 4-3-3, and he's played 4-2-3-1. I mean, those have been kind of his primary going back, let's say 5-6 seasons. So we have seen very limited amounts of that kind of flexibility. So that continues to be something that I'll be curious to see as we head into next season, whether we kind of move in that direction a little more. Because if we do, then I could see a Haksabanovic having, a role, maybe not at the European level, but in filling depth through a long season of 60+ games. That kind of role in that kind of system, I could see him actually being a really good fit in a certain kind of utilization.
Anything from you, Al?
We've talked about the development pathway and how suboptimal that is, and it has a massive impact, and it's probably contributed us to losing a lot of talent in the last few years. And that's a Scottish football problem. It's not just a Celtic problem. Other clubs have lost young players as well, so it does need fixing for sure. It's almost better, really, that you have a well targeted, thoughtful loan for somebody like a Vata or a Bosun Lowell, for example, than you play them in the B team, frankly, and getting 28 minutes a season in the first team. If they were playing in, I don't know, a sort of a team in League One that's either challenging for the playoffs or challenging to keep out of the relegation zone, they're going to learn a lot more, I suspect, in those circumstances. So yeah, it all needs looking at. But all you can say is that there's clearly a will within the club to try and push some of these players forward. It looks like Steve McManus and Darren O'Day have got a good relationship with Postecoglou. Vata's got minutes, Summers has got minutes, Lawl's got minutes. So I think those are the three that they've got kind of high hopes for, really. And hopefully in the last 5 games they'll get some more. But that's not going to do it. As James says, you can't just have 20 minutes and then you go back to playing in the B League and the Lowland League, etc., which is where Celtic will be again next season. That's better than nothing. It's competitive football. But you need to think, all right, if these are the guys that are my prospects, where's the best option for them to be on loan? Who plays in a similar-ish kind of style to us? What sort of standard are they playing at? Factor all those things in, really. But yeah, so it's difficult. It is difficult because we're fighting against the structure of Scottish football. We all know that there's little talent really at the highest level of the game in Scotland to really sort of plot a path through that strategically.
Yeah, it goes against all of my morals when it comes to football, but Celtic sort of need a second club somewhere that they're partners at least with, that they're able to send these players to in a lower level. Now, the obvious choice for me for all of this is Shamrock Rovers, who Dermot Desmond also has shares in, because the League of Ireland is definitely a higher standard than the Lowland Leagues, and Shamrock Rovers are the best team in it. But the problem is they're probably too good. That's probably the issue, is that Shamrock Rovers have players that are probably better than the players that Celtic would be sending out on loan. So the game time might be difficult unless you're dealing with a real talent. And I guess the obvious thing here is Johnny Kenny, who didn't really make an impact at Celtic at all, but isn't really starting for Shamrock Rovers this season either when it comes to the League of Ireland. So yeah, it's an imperfect system so far, and it's going to be imperfect for the next while. I don't think we have solutions on it. I know you're getting Shamrock Rovers up on the table. They're 4th at the minute, but trust me, they're the best in it.
Aren't you part of the
best player that the League of Ireland has ever produced? And he's struggling to get a game for Celtic, I would suggest.
Who's that? Liam Scales?
I thought Liam Scales was the best player that come out of the League of Ireland since Roy Keane.
No, not at all. Ross Tierney for Motherwell is clearly. I think that's where we'll park the show for today, because I think we got into as much as we possibly could from a 4-1 victory against Kilmarnock, where the league is already tied up. But can I set you guys some homework for a future show, which I now have a good appetite to do?
Sure.
I would like to do a historical show on Henrik Larsson and his seasons with Celtic. I think that would be good. Now I think it would make some people's head explode. I do think that. But
wait till you get my wait till you get my John Barnes hot take on that.
Oh God! If it's as hot as some of John Barnes's takes, I'm going to need a good lawyer. Yeah. So can we do that? Will we do a Henrik Larsson special show sometime before the end of the season potentially? Is that doable?
The only thing I'll say is from a data perspective, I manually went through using Celtic Wiki and YouTube just to get, like, since 2000, didn't even go back to his first 2 seasons, just from 2000 onwards. So I had a this century view on goals and assists. It was really just to collect assists, because obviously goals you can read that anywhere, but to get the assists I went back, but that's really all we've got to go on. Don't have any of the sort of advanced stats or anything like that, so just bear that in mind. Not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying, bear in mind it'll be kind of stats light in that regard. It'll focus on goals and assists, and that's probably pretty much it.
Sure, that's the only stat that matters on is the goals that go in and the goals that don't. At the end of the day,
you can tell you're in a bad mood.
All right, we will park the show there. If you are watching on YouTube, do keep the comments coming. Loads of conversations going on there, and make sure to like the video while you're in the comments as well. It helps the algorithm pop us up everywhere else on YouTube for those people who aren't subscribed to the channel already. And this show will be available on podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. I'm going to go out and enjoy the sun. Alan, James, I hope you are too. And everyone else, have a good evening. We'll chat to you later. Good luck.